Now, to further break down and digest these unexpected turn of events over the last few hours, I have to my right Dr. Bong Young-shik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies here with me. And to my left, we have Arirang's Unification Ministry correspondent Oh Jung-hee, who's been with us for the last few hours as well. It's good to have you both here.
Pleased to be here.
Now, as we heard, the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump were meant to have a summit to discuss how to move ahead in their denuclearization discussions, but it broke down, and we heard President Trump give a press conference about why it broke down. Can you give us some of the reasons why he said it didn't work out?
Well, according to U.S. President Donald Trump, it seems like the issue of sanctions was the main sticking point between North Korea and the United States. Well, apparently North Korea wanted all of its sanctions off. So North Korea demanded the United States to ease all of its sanctions and plus all of its UNSC sanctions to get them all out. And apparently U.S. was demanding North Korea to take measures that go beyond dismantling just Yongbyon nuclear facilities. Washington was aware that North Korea had another large-scale facility besides Yongbyon, and the United States was demanding North Korea to take some, steps that would be irreversible and substantive towards denuclearization. But according to U.S. President Trump, Chairman Kim Jong-un was not ready to meet U.S. standards. So the issue of sanctions was the main sticking point. Pyongyang wanted all of its sanctions to be eliminated, but that was not what the U.S. was ready to give.
Dr. Bong, I'd like to bring you in now. So the North Koreans demanded all sanctions to be lifted. Does that sound right to you? Do you think Kim Jong-un really would have come into that negotiating room and had a large demand on the U.S. part?
It must have been regarded by the Trump administration as a very large demand, because it's a demand by North Koreans to lift the sanctions in their entirety. And prior to the process of dismantling facilities in Yongbyon, if not elsewhere, fully completed. So without knowing the genuine intentions of North Korean leadership for complete and verifiable denuclearization, it must have been too much for the Trump administration to accept, to lift all the economic sanctions in their entirety. Because deals are made when both sides agree that the price is right. But this time the prices proposed by the United States and North Korea were far apart.
There was someone we interviewed earlier who suggested that while Trump says he walked away from the deal, that it was in fact North Korea who walked away from the deal because it was the U.S. who was demanding too much. What do you think of that interpretation? As you said, the prices have to be right. Maybe the prices was too high on the U.S. side, or maybe even both sides.
Well, first of all, I'd like to just answer that. What's the point of splitting the air? I mean, who walked away from the negotiation table first, right? The negotiation failed to produce agreement, and that's it. That is a new reality that the United States and North Korea have to live with and based on in order to make progress, in order to achieve their own respective goals. And responsibility lies on both sides, to be fair, because in the eyes of North Korean leadership, the demand from United States was too much, excessive. And in the eyes of U.S. President Donald Trump and his negotiation team, the demand of lifting all the economic sanctions in their entirety at once, prior to North Korea having completed the process of denuclearization of at least Yongbyon site, was too much to give, right? Because there is no way to verify North Korea's genuine intention. And once economic sanctions are lifted, at least a part of them are lifted, then the pressure that Trump administration believed are the biggest and most effective instrument to pressure North Korean leadership to walk in the direction of negotiation in favor of denuclearization will be gone. There will be no coming back to that point. So both sides were excessive and unreasonable if you judge them from the other side's point of view.
Jung-hee, what were the two sides hoping to get from this summit if we look before the summit? What were we expecting the declaration to look like? What were some of the outcomes that people had been expecting?
Well, the key point of this summit was, of course, what denuclearization steps North Korea would take in the next stage and what corresponding measures the U.S. could take in return. So in terms of North Korea's denuclearization, there are some key points that that the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, has mentioned before at his speech at Stanford University, and those include Kim Jong-un's commitment to have experts come over to verify not only the dismantlement of a Punggye-ri nuclear test site, but as well as the Dongchang-ri missile engine test site, and plus also going to dismantle the Yongbyon nuclear test sites. And also from the U.S. point of view, what it wanted was to be provided with an inventory of all the nuclear arsenals, testing sites, weapons and whatnot from North Korea. And in the end, the U.S. would also, the United States would also have wanted to, remove all the weapons out of the country. From the North Korean side, there are four things that North Korea wanted from Washington. First is sanctions relief, of course. That is the most important one. The second one is exchanging liaison offices. The third, declaring a formal end to the Korean War. And these second and third one are some political incentives that the United States could offer to North Korea. And the fourth would be, enabling the two Koreas to resume their inter-Korean economic projects, which would include not only the Kaesong Industrial Complex and South Korean tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgangsan, but as well as the joint road and railroad projects that Seoul and Pyongyang wanted to start in mid last year.
So there was a lot on this table here for the two sides to try and gain. But Dr. Bong, so now that the talks have broken down, who loses out more, or who had more to gain but now is not going to get what they were hoping for?
Of course, the North Korea is the bigger loser in this breakdown of the negotiation, because if the current situation continues, then the sanctions will remain in place and North Korea will suffer continuously from the impact of economic sanctions. Now we know that although North Koreans touted that economic sanctions wouldn't hurt the republic and its people, they can just rely on themselves in the spirit of self-reliance. But now we know that sanctions are really hurting North Korea where it hurts. That is the reason why Kim Jong-un wasted no time to bring up lifting all economic sanctions as the absolute conditions for North Korea giving something related to denuclearization to the Trump administration of the United States. If sanctions have not been hurting North Korea, then North Koreans must have been quite flexible in accepting other proposals, possibly proposed by Trump administration, such as opening of liaison offices in their respective cities and the declaration of the official end of the Korean War. But it now became so apparent that Mr. Kim Jong-un had no interest in talking about the issues prior to demanding lifting economic sanctions. That means that economic sanctions have been working and working so well. And now President Trump is really convinced that as long as the United States holds on to economic sanctions, it has North Korea hanging in the air.
But can there be a different interpretation? Because if sanctions really are hurting North Korea, wouldn't Kim have come to this summit prepared to make some deals as such, at least a partial lifting of sanctions, to ease the burden that they are feeling of sanctions, if they really are feeling that burden? Because there's another argument that we've had as well earlier today that says perhaps North Korea came to this meeting not planning to have a deal, that they came ready to spoil whatever was going to happen.
Right. What I have observed in Trump administration dealing with Kim Jong-un leadership of North Korea is that Trump administration is more like North Korea than the United States in dealing with North Korea. U.S. President walking away with no agreement from negotiation on nuclear weapons. That is exactly the behavior typical of North Korea in the past, dealing with the United States in six-party talks or bilateral negotiations. Brinkmanship, right? Taking risk, stonewalling. Now, North Korea has met its counterpart in Trump administration, behaving just like themselves. So Trump administration took some key place from playbook of North Korea and dealing with Kim Jong-un regime, likewise.
I have one question popping up in my mind. Could I just ask
Yes,
one
of course.
question too? So what I want to ask you is, in terms of going towards complete denuclearization, do you think suspending the summit like this today, do you think this was the right choice? Or do you think the leaders should have at least signed an agreement and made some concessions toward each other and leave some room for future engagements? What do you think?
I believe that no deal is far better than a bad deal. And it is good that Trump administration did not sign on a bad deal because it hasn't been proven. Now we know in the second summit meeting in Hanoi that economic sanctions are so effective in changing the behavior of North Korea, at least temporarily, but in significant ways. So why do you give up or dilute the powerful mechanisms that would guarantee the best chance to achieve denuclearization in verifiable way of North Korea, right?
So from what I'm getting from you, you feel Trump has come out on top in this situation?
Definitely. It's a simple. Kim Jong-un, according to President Donald Trump's press conference, had promised, regardless of the outcome of the Hanoi summit meeting on the 28th, he was not going to conduct another nuclear or missile test, right? No more test. No more test. So status quo. If the current condition continue, North Korea will remain under the pressure of very harsh economic sanctions. United States will continue to be free from worrying about North Korea increasing and sophisticating its nuclear and missile capability that can attack the United States. So who's on the top with time? United States.
One more point I want to raise there, carrying on for that. Mike Pompeo, during the press conference, he also spoke and he said they learned a lot about what limitations and how far North Korea is ready to go. It almost sounds they weren't aware of what North Korea was going to be like. These sounds a bit naive. And there's an argument to be made, I think, that Trump, he promised that they would take steps towards denuclearization, but now he's gone all the way to Hanoi and is coming back to the U.S. with nothing to show for it.
But as I said, no deal is far better than a bad deal, especially for you to answer the criticism from your political opponents and the media people at home, right? I mean, he would have faced even far harsher and stronger criticism had President Trump signed on a piece of paper as an agreement with North Korea that showed nothing about a process of denuclearization of North Korea in concrete and verifiable way.
But what I mean is that North Korea still keep their nuclear weapons now.
Right, but at the same time, it's a capability to attack the United States territory with intercontinental ballistic missile topped with a nuclear warhead is still a few months away. It has not been materialized, and United States has not reached the boiling point to seriously worry about that threat as a matter of harsh reality.
We're seeing pictures now of earlier in the day when President Trump and Kim Jong-un met. At this time, there was obviously no clue what was going to happen. We were perhaps caught unawares of what could happen. Let's give an update on what's happened with Trump and Kim at the moment. Jung-hee, what's the latest on those two leaders? We know Trump left Vietnam on his Air Force One just about an hour ago.
Trump is currently on way back to Washington, and he's actually having a phone conversation with South Korean President Moon, sharing what he talked about with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And he is also believed to talk with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as well on his way back to Washington. For the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un arrived at his hotel, the Melia Hotel, 4 hours ago, but he's not been showing any special movements recently. But it's believed that he could, possibly move over to another place, possibly Vietnam's state guest house, and continue on with his leftover schedules for his friendly visit to Vietnam.
We also heard there's some movement from Kim Jong-un's delegation as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
That is true. A North Korean delegation led by Lee Gil-sung, a foreign service official who's actually North Korea's vice foreign minister, is heading to China. We are not sure if he arrived in China, but that actually raises speculation whether Kim Jong-un could be meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping on his way back to Pyongyang from Vietnam.
Dr. Bong, how do you think Kim Jong-un is feeling right now? What is the situation for North Korea and where do they go next?
Dismayed, disappointed, angered. But how he's going to ventilate his emotions is another question, because he allegedly promised President Donald Trump that there will be no more missile or nuclear tests. So the ways that he could express his frustration and anger toward the United States is quite limited. Although he threatened subtly in his New Year's message to the nation on the first day of 2019 that if the United States will ignore the sincere gesture made by North Korea and provide corresponding measures, and North Korea has no other choice but to find so-called a new way. New way has been interpreted as North Korea resuming nuclear and missile tests. But he had promised not to go in that direction. So North Korea's options are self-limited. So that is why North Korea is going to consult with Xi Jinping, government of China, for the next step to rekindle the hope to have existing economic sanctions lifted in its entirety, or successively at least.
This is very interesting because some of the other opinions we've been hearing over the last few hours have had a very different opinion from yourself, Dr. Bong, about how they interpret it.
That's good you invited me tonight. To have a variety of opinions.
Yes, to get a fair balance. Some say it's Trump who walked away and came out with a better situation, that he walked away, but some saying his comments about him walking away shouldn't be taken at face value. Let's talk a bit more about Kim Jong-un, about his schedule coming up now as well, because we know he's meant to be staying in Vietnam for a couple more days.
That's right. Kim Jong-un's going to stay in Vietnam up until March 2nd. That's 2 more days from today. It's expected that he's going to meet with the Vietnamese president as well as the prime minister and possibly the National Assembly chairwoman. And he could also make some trips over to famous tourist attractions or some industrial facilities in the country. For example, the North Korean delegation visited Halong Bay yesterday, and also Haiphong, the industrial port town, which is actually also home to South Korea's LG Electronics, a firm in Vietnam. So it is also possible that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un could make a stopover at Halong Bay. We know that Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Il-sung, visited the Halong Bay in 1964. So he may, try to mirror that visit once again, and he could also visit Haiphong, plus the manufacturing base of Bac Ninh, possibly a Samsung Electronics smartphone factory in Bac Ninh province as well.
Before this visit, there was a lot of talk about how Kim Jong-un would come to Vietnam and see the economic development, the economic success story of Vietnam, and take that as inspiration to take back home and improve North Korea's economy, and how Trump himself has said he would help in that regard, and he also wanted to push that message to Kim Jong-un. But now that the talks have failed, how is the next 2 days, his visit to Vietnam, how's that going to color what he sees, do you think?
Well, there has been a rumor that was not confirmed that Kim Jong-un might have just canceled the remaining 2 days in Hanoi and just went directly back to North Korea, and en route having a meeting with Xi Jinping of China, but it has not been confirmed. There are two possible interpretations for Chairman Kim Jong-un to choose Vietnam as a site of the second summit meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. One is to, as you said, that get an inspiration from the very successful case of very strong political leadership and thriving economy in Vietnam, as well as a successful reconciliation with the former adversary, which is the United States since the Vietnam War. So following the path of Vietnam must be very attractive and inspirational to North Korean leadership. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation is that showing the image that the leadership is truly committed to enhancing the livelihood of its people in North Korea and engage in economic development instead of weapons of mass destruction production. That the argument that lifting economic sanctions on North Korea will pave the way for North Korean leadership to focus on economic development and lose interest in maintaining nuclear warheads and intercontinental ballistic missiles. So it's kind of persuading the United States saying that, listen, as you can see that we are interested in economic development, not nuclear weapon or missile development. But because of your economic sanctions as a major hurdle, we cannot make the shift from focus on maintenance of nuclear warheads and missiles and move to focus on economic development. Which interpretation is correct? We have to wait and see with time.
Let's look ahead now what this means for the future of North Korea and U.S. relations. Now, Trump did try to put a positive spin, saying that they did make progress to understand each other a little bit better, and it was a friendly walkaway, is how Trump described it. There was also a question about whether there will be future summits. What was some of the things that was covered in the press conference, Jung-hee?
Right. At the press conference, President Trump received a question on whether he himself and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un promised to have another summit, and he said no, not yet. So it seems like another summit between Kim and Trump is not going to happen anytime soon. And, after the Singapore summit last year on June 12th, we saw nuclear negotiations between Pyongyang and Washington pretty much stalled. Secretary Pompeo went to Pyongyang, but it seemed like the two couldn't really satisfy each other's standards. So they failed to have an agreement on that, and their negotiations faced a deadlock, which lasted for a couple of months, which lasted for several months actually until the end of last year. I'm actually afraid that this could happen once again. We're not sure if working level delegations will start meeting each other again and make progress on this front, but we'll have to see. And we'll also have to see whether South Korean President Moon will sort of bring himself into this field and get his mediator role going on once again.
Before we get into President Moon's roles in all of this, do you think, Dr. Bong, that the North Korea-U.S. will continue to have discussions on denuclearization, or possibly could this now be dead in the water?
No, it's not in the dead water. I mean, the negotiations and conversations will continue as long as North Koreans will accept the invitation by the United States. The door remains open.
But why would, in this situation, why would if we go with Trump's words about how North Korea was demanding too much, why would the U.S. continue to try and negotiate with North Korea?
As I said, the heart of negotiation is to find the price point that is accessible to both sides. I mean, the asking price by one side must be too high, inordinately high. But there is a hope in any negotiation that the price may change to your favor. So that is the reason why you continue to remain in negotiations and continue to talk to the other party.
But with this situation now, do you think another summit could happen soon? Or, as we know, Trump's first term, only has 2 more years left. If he has a second term, obviously he has more time to try and make these negotiations. But with only 2 years left, there's not a lot of time.
There's not a lot of time, but the third summit meeting between Kim and Trump can take place in 2 days if North Korean leadership accepts all the demands from the United States, or vice versa, right? It's a conditional. It's conditional. It is not yes or no, or there will be a third summit or not. It is all conditional.
I have a question to Dr. Bong. If further negotiations are to take place between Pyongyang and Washington, do you think it'll be Washington, or do you think it'll be Pyongyang that makes concessions, that decides to, give in?
I don't think it'll be primarily important for either side, the site venue of the third summit meeting. But I personally hope that Mr. Kim Jong-un will travel to Washington, D.C., the capital city of the United States, as a way of improving his image in the eyes of the American people. Because it is very important to give hope and conviction to the U.S. government and its people that North Korea can change. North Korea will abandon nuclear weapons. North Korea and the United States can coexist in peace. But the image of North Korea has been so deteriorated. The death of Otto Warmbier is just one of so many cases that really put image of North Korea in very negative way for the American people. So being present in very productive and cordial meeting with the President of the United States and resulted in major progress in reconciliation and denuclearization of North Korea, then the image of North Korea will greatly improve. We remember that when Mr. Deng Xiaoping, the leader, paramount leader of China, went to the United States and wore the cowboy hat. Everyone on earth instantly recognized that China meant business. Deng Xiaoping really was going to lead China in the direction of economic reform and opening. That kind of powerful message is desperately needed for Kim Jong-un if Kim Jong-un wants to make productive result in negotiation with the United States.
Now, we've only got a few minutes left, but let's talk about what this means for South Korea. As we said earlier, President Moon Jae-in had a lot riding on this summit. He had a lot of hopes about making progress on inter-Korean exchanges. But for now, there seems there won't be much progress in the foreseeable future for now.
Well, there's no shortcut, or there is no workaround. The essential condition, if you want to be the effective moderator or the driver of the Korean affairs. What the United States wants is getting rid of nuclear weapons. The text of President Trump's press conference means that, well, many people have different definitions and concepts of denuclearization, but he knows one thing, that denuclearization means getting rid of nuclear weapons. And North Korea has not done that. At least there is no evidence that North Korean leadership has been doing that, or North Korean leadership is genuinely determined to doing so. All we know as evidence is words spoken not by the supreme leader of North Korea, but by government officials and president of not North Korea, but South Korea. And Hanoi summit meeting failed to convince the U.S. government that North Korean leadership is truly determined and committed to denuclearization in ways that are acceptable to the United States. Without that, United States is not going to lift any economic sanctions. So the ball is in the court of North Korea now.
Jung-hee, what was on the line for South Korea for this summit? What were some of the inter-Korean exchanges that they were hoped could make progress after this?
Well, South Korea obviously wanted to enable more sanctions waivers, at least in more areas, so that it could resume projects with the North in terms of, resuming the Kaesong Industrial Complex or South Korean tours to North Korea's Kumgangsan Mountain, and plus, make further progress on connecting their roads and railroads. So in those fronts, South Korean President Moon has told U.S. President Donald Trump that South Korea will take up the role of providing economic incentives to North Korea if that lessens the U.S. burden, but it seems like that actually it didn't happen through today's summit. But I have one question for Dr. Bong. I mean, you know how the leaders of the two Koreas met each other to enable the Singapore summit and to make a breakthrough to the stalled nuclear negotiations last year. And by that, I refer to the May 26th summit as well as the September 19th summit, right? So do you think there's a high chance of the leaders of the two Koreas meeting soon, or at least in several months, to sort of, come up with a breakthrough measure to, get this nuclear negotiations rolling?
Well, it is very likely, and it is necessary, I think, for leaders of both Koreas to sit together, not because of they would agree on proceeding inter-Korean economic cooperation projects without United States agreement to lift economic sanctions. They would jeopardize South Korean people and private companies. But as long as the purpose of another inter-Korean summit meeting is for South Korean president to persuade Mr. Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader of North Korea, to agree on complete and verifiable denuclearization in accordance with the international procedure, like inspection, report inspection, verification, and dismantlement with the presence of IAEA. Then it will be a very necessary and productive inter-Korean summit meeting.
That's where we'll have to wrap up the discussions for now. But Dr. Bong will be with us for our a later newscast at the top of the hour.
I promise I won't walk away.
Thank you for that. And Jung-hee, it's been great having you here. And you'll be staying as well for the next newscast as well. Yes, thank you both for your input.
Thank you.